Welcome to another episode of Progress, Potential, and Possibilities, discussions with fascinating people designing a better tomorrow for all of us. I'm your host, Ira Pastor.
Welcome, everybody, again to another episode of our show. Today, bringing you another really fascinating guest involved in creating a better tomorrow. Today, we have the honor of being joined by Patty Keating. Patty is the executive director of the HypoPARAthyroidism Association, which is an advocacy organization that works to improve the lives of people impacted by hypoparathyroidism through education, support, research, of course, advocacy programs. Patty comes to the organization actually, very interesting, as a post-surgical hypoparathyroidism patient since back in 2015. And prior to that, spent the last couple of decades in various leadership roles in the hair salon business, overseeing hundreds of locations around the country. She's also a licensed real estate agent. Obviously, a lot of business activity before taking on this extremely important executive director role within the HPA. And again, as a patient, she realized quite quickly that she needed to learn all she could about this very rare disease to become not just an advocate for herself, but ultimately the community at large, and ultimately seeing patients struggle through this condition, combined with her leadership skills, made her an ideal person to lead the organization, and combine that with her passion. It's a very interesting topic that we don't normally get into, and I'm excited to have with us. Patty Keating, welcome to our show today.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's great having you. And again, we haven't done as much, I think, on the show about advocacy in general, but in this particular case, because we're dealing with a rare disorder, that makes it all the more interesting. But before we get into any of that, would love to just, as we typically do, hand things over to you for a couple minutes just to talk a little bit more about you, the sort of hypoparathyroidism. Just take a few minutes just to introduce yourself and a little bit more about who you are, if you would.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really do appreciate the time here today, because it is a rare disease, and it's really misunderstood in a lot of cases. I mean, I think a lot of times people think of parathyroid and thyroid as the same thing, and they're two completely different things for sure. And really, my journey started back and like you said, in 2015, where I had some what they call complex tumors on my thyroid. And I had a sister that passed away at a young age because she had had thyroid cancer, and then she had had some complications with the thyroid piece of it. And she had passed away. So of course, when I hear I've got tumors on my thyroid, I'm immediately, yes, we need to get this taken care of. So of course, they sent me to a surgeon. And at that time, it was interesting because, quite honestly, I'd never even heard the word parathyroid before. I've heard thyroid, didn't understand what a parathyroid was at all. And quite honestly, I didn't totally understand it until about 6 months later. So I went through the surgery. I remember afterwards, feeling like my face was buzzing. It was like zzz, just like a really strange feeling. And that's one of the symptoms of low calcium. And I remember calling the surgeon going, golly, I just feel like I'm like crazy. My face is buzzing. My hands are buzzing. Something's happening with me. And he's like, take some more calcium. I don't think you can overdose on calcium. Just take it and you'll start to feel better. And A little bit I did here and there. And I was seeing an endocrinologist at the time that I was actually the only hypopara patient. Again, being a rare disease, these things happen. So we were learning together as we
Hmm.
went through. And, I'm trying to research, they're trying to research, we're trying to understand different treatment options, the calcitrol, the
Hmm.
calcium. We would take that. And about 6 months in, I started to notice I was really struggling to kind of walk. I was struggling, like I would sit there and I would see my toes like literally cramp up. My fingers would literally cramp up. And this is what they call tetany. Well, I had no idea. I'm like a normal person who doesn't think about tetany kind of things, because I've never had something like that before. So I'm like, oh, isn't that funny? My toes curling up by themselves. And I was out for work in another state, staying with a friend, and I went to go walk up her stairs on the third floor, which normally I was in really great shape at that point. I had a trainer. I was, feeling fantastic and doing all these things before the thyroidectomy, and go to walk up these stairs, and I'm like, my legs won't move. I could not get myself to go up there and carry a suitcase. So I had to have her carried up. And I remember that evening going to bed and just laying there, and just the whole buzzing thing was happening again. And I thought to myself, man, if this is it, like, gosh, I've kind of had a good life here, but go to sleep, just go to sleep. I had had some heartburn, so I take Tums. Well, lo and behold, Tums is calcium.
Right.
So it started to help. A few days later, I'm home. We went, it was Easter actually, went for dinner, came home, and all of a sudden my heart started running across my chest, running across. I was
Mm.
like, oh my gosh. Told my husband something's wrong. He's like, get in the car. I get to the emergency room and I'm having a heart attack. So here I am at 50 years old now, having this heart attack. They did a heart catheterization and they're like, she doesn't have, we're not putting a stent in. We don't got any artery things going on here. What in the heck is happening?
Right.
And it was a result of the calcium, magnesium, the potassium, phosphorus, all to just going crazy, because I was not being treated enough for the hypoparathyroidism. So after that, I was like, what is this, a life sentence? I didn't know what was going to happen, and I was scared to death, running to every emergency room after I'd have a little heart flutters going on, because I didn't know if it was going to happen again. And I went online and I found the Hypoparathyroidism Association, and they were happened to have a conference, and I was working in the state that they were having the conference. And I asked a friend of mine, excuse me, I hope I don't get choked up. I asked a friend of mine to go with me on this. And we sat in the parking lot, and I said, I don't want to be a part of this club. I don't want to go in there. Like I don't even know what I'm going to be facing here. So I just was petrified to go in there. But lo and behold, I go in, and it was very welcoming. They had all these doctors. I got to sit with doctors and talk with them about what is going on with me. And from there, I was able to find some experts to be able to help me. I will say the next couple of years, it was tough because, again, I would run to every emergency room because I was petrified I was going to have a heart attack again from it. But I finally did get, I guess, what you would call controlled. So I wasn't having to run to the emergency room. And then I was fortunate to be able to participate in some clinical trials, and life has changed since then. And we'll certainly talk about that as we talk about PTH
Sure.
therapy. But it's really been quite a journey, and like you're right, it's been a decade of trying to figure this out, trying to really figure this out to live.
Right. Yeah, that was very surprising reading. And again, I'm one of those folks that, right, I remember, my thyroid lessons from
Yeah.
from high school and college biology, and literally the amount of attention paid to the parathyroid was like 3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's this other thing, and it's involved in calcium and whatever, just whatever. That's not going to be a test, but the numbers here, right? I mean, so between 70 and 90,000 patients in the United States, so classified as a rare orphan disease, and the whole, in the sense of your case, and this is not rare, a lot of these inadvertent removals of the parathyroid glands, just maybe clinicians don't, yeah, the parathyroid's there, but I don't think too much about it. Say a couple words about the community, right? Because I mean, and again, and I apologize, I need some hand holding here because we don't do as much as we should in terms of the advocacy community. This is not something like, here, there's this rare genetic disease over here. Everyone, okay, there's this odd mutation and so forth. And this is not that. I mean, this is a little different. What if you could just talk a little bit about what the community is like? I mean, it was sort of where it is, where you are, where the organization is headquartered, and a little bit, as you were just mentioning, about uh, what your treatment was like. Because I was reading about it could be hundreds, lots of pills in terms of calcium and vitamin supplements, and ultimately, you don't want to, obviously, these things to drop too far, but at the same time, too much, not good, because we don't want calcium deposits in our brains and our kidneys, cataract formation. So a very delicate balance here. Talk a little bit about what sort of the typical day of therapy is like for something like this before we get to sort of the new therapies, and what things were
Yeah.
like for you and other members of the organization.
Yeah, it's interesting because and after I had the heart attack, I ordered the pathology report from the surgeon because I thought, God, they didn't tell me anything about this. And in the report, it said parathyroid's identified. So there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times where it might just not be followed up on as much as it needs to be able to be appropriately treated. We have people that are in a genetic form that
Okay.
are actually treated for epilepsy because of, like, I remember I talked about the tetany and
Yep.
the seizures and the things that happen there. So we have people that go through, 41 years of life and they don't find out till later. Or I know I had heard of a patient recently just diagnosed at 80 years old,
Mm.
because she went through the genetic testing and found out and didn't realize. But yeah, there's just a lot. It's a very fine balance. So at one point, you know I would think, you get up, you take your medicine, and you move on about your day. Well, that wasn't totally working because by 1 o'clock, I'd start to feel like, whoa, what's happening?
Mm-hmm.
Buzzing going on again. So I actually went to a nephrologist. They recommended I go to a nephrologist because, again, you got to protect those kidneys
Right. Yeah.
because the enormous amount of calcium and active vitamin D and stuff that you're taking can really do damage to the arteries, to the kidneys. So I went to her and she's like, okay, let's spread this out. So I set alarms on my phone I take medicine 6 times a day is what I would do. And it would begin at 5 a.m. in the morning and it would end at 10 p.m. at night. So I'd have a little bit of sleep in there where a lot of the patients don't. They wake up in the middle of the night and they take it through. At one point, it was up to 36 pills a day.
Yeah.
That's not even the most. I've seen people taking 60 and 80. It's just insane the amount to keep alive,
Mm-hmm.
not to feel comfortable, to keep alive. So it got to a point where you almost had to tell people because your alarms are going off during the day, and is telling people, or your alarm more important, you need to take that medicine. So that's a little uncomfortable for a patient. Most people don't run around and tell people what kind of medicine they're taking or how often they're taking it and doing
Right.
all these things. So that was tough. So but it is a lot of medication to be able to take to keep somewhat level, to live somewhat of a normal kind of life, but still having symptoms all the way through. No matter, every day you have symptoms as a hypopara patient. unless you're appropriately treated. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. And that's based on experience. So, watching my community or our community, it's tough because post-surgical, it's happened to you, and there's a little bit of that whole anger that goes through that, and why, and you have so many questions. You're living a very normal life, and our age group for post-surgical is usually 45 or older. So you're kind of like, you've lived your life to all those years, and now life is completely changed. Where genetic, you may be born with it and don't really realize how much better life could be if you were diagnosed and appropriately treated. I want to speak on the genetic a little bit, because I do
Sure.
think that there's an opportunity for better diagnosis for people that are genetic, because what happens is they'll get a calcium test potentially that says, oh, they're a little bit low. Maybe, a kid, drink some milk, eat some cheese, do some, adult might be take a calcium pill, whatever.
Right.
But if you go that one step further and do that PTH lab test, it might tell you a little different story.
Right.
Then you start to go into some genetic testing so you could really understand what the whole story is. Because if you're out on the playground, Johnny's out on the playground playing, and he gets exhausted and he gets buzzy, tingly lips, he doesn't know that Susie doesn't have the same thing. He thinks she does. So
Mm.
you're born with these symptoms that you think are part of your normal daily life, right? Until
Right.
they become extreme. So where in a post-surgical, you haven't had these symptoms your whole life, and then it's very dramatic after,
Mm.
if that makes
Got it.
sense.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So
It's please.
yeah, it's just tough for the community to sometimes to really, as a patient, including myself, to accept that. It took me a while to accept it. Then
Right.
it was kind of like, okay, it's happened. I cannot change it. How do I change my life moving forward?
Right.
How do I educate myself as much as I can? How do I turn the negative into positive to really be able to help people? Not that I don't get down about it, or not that, sometimes you don't feel great, but how do you know that you take that energy and you turn it around to be able to like live your best life? Because we never get this moment in time back,
Right.
ever.
Right. No, it's yeah, it's interesting. Thinking about the I call them factions, but the two sort of ends of the spectrum there, and how you as the leading an advocacy organization have to think about sort of all of the ins and outs to those different scenarios. And it's great that part of the advocacy thing is, hey, proper diagnostics and finding out properly that, hey, this is what's wrong with me, and then it's not well, as in the case of the 80-year-old, I guess it took a long
Yeah,
time to ultimately
that's
get
a tough
there,
one.
but yeah. Yeah, let's talk a little bit about, because a major thing happened in the last couple of months, and that was the FDA approval of the hormone replacement therapy, and I'm going to pronounce this poorly, but Palopegteriparatide.
Mhm.
So sort of synthetic, or actually I don't comment it, but replacement for uh, parathyroid hormone. Talk about this a little bit, because you mentioned you were involved in clinical trials. I'm not sure if you were specifically in this one, but take a little time to talk a little about the history of this product's development. Obviously, it's probably something that you've been waiting for a while, and clearly, when I was reading about it and reading about your story and what sort of the standard of care has been for decades now, this is sort of like, if we go back to 1921 when insulin first arrived, I mean, this is a
Right,
game changer, right?
right.
So talk a little bit about the history here, if you can talk about any involvement in the clinical trials, and then what this product means for patients, both genetic and surgical.
Yeah, it's been exciting. We've all been involved, or a lot of us have been involved in clinical trials. We have a nice pipeline full of PTH products that are coming, and
Mhm.
Yorvipath, the you said it, I'll say Yorvipath because that's its name now. It was Transcon as we were going through the clinical trials. So, but yeah, so it's a game changer for a lot of people. We've watched people go through the clinical trials, including myself. I've been in a clinical trial, so watched lives completely change. In the beginning, it's so scary. It's kind of like, oh my gosh, what is this going to do to me? And I'm afraid to not take my calcium. But on the other hand, you don't want to go high on your calcium either, because
Right.
that's a whole other situation.
Sure.
And sometimes really bad. So like it was really exciting and scary at the same time. But
Yeah.
watching people that were bedridden or on IV calcium every single day, they had to go get an infusion every single day, or they land in the hospital every single week, to being out hiking, walking, baking with their kids, doing things with their families, cooking a holiday meal, doing all these things. It's just amazing. So here's the thing, like we for so many years supplemented the calcium because we needed that calcium to move, right? We needed to make sure that was in a good place. But
Hmm.
it really didn't always take care of all the symptoms. The underlying issue, as we've said, is the parathyroid. So this comes in and helps boost that. So now everything works like it's supposed to. So
Hmm.
voila, like you're feeling like great. I can say personally for myself, I haven't had symptoms in quite some time now. Just as you mentioned, like insulin or diabetic, of course, I don't expect my whole life to go through and never have a symptom again, because I might go out and overexert myself or do something that would create my calcium to go up or down for whatever reason. But this is a game changer for everybody. It's for parathyroid patients. It's just amazing how it's an injection a day, so you're not doing like 36 pills 6 times a
Right.
day. You may supplement a calcium here or there, but as a general, I mean, it's a once a day injection, and you move on about your life, and your life becomes about life and not hypoparathyroidism constantly every minute of the day. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, no, it's again, I was, I spent a lot of time in the past sort of, studying the history of insulin, and yeah, it sort of rang a bell on that front. Like, my God, this is, an exponential change to what's currently available. So that part's extremely exciting. And if you could talk about this, and again, I was just looking at the cost of it, and I was wondering because it seems okay. I mean, we're in the era of biotech and things are expensive. And any issues with the cost and managed care organizations and things like that in the United States? I mean, clearly it seems extremely pharmacoeconomically beneficial compared to the cost on the healthcare side of what happens to patients like you if this is not controlled. But any issues that we should know about as far as that and how your organization sort of works with the payer side of things to make sure
Yeah.
this stuff's covered.
Yeah, of course, when we first saw it, we were like, whoa,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, how's anybody going to be able to afford this? And, everybody was a little bit freaked out. But as with any new drug that comes out, these things happen. And so, I mean, what's great is that Ascendus does have their ASAP, their
Hmm.
signature access program.
Great.
So they have set up where they have a nurse advocate that actually works with each individual patient, because you can have the same insurances, and this one covers it and that one doesn't cover it, and everybody's story is completely individual. I mean, the patient does have to advocate for themselves in the sense of they need to have had been to the doctor and things like that to make sure that they have the documentation that they need. But it's been really great to watch patients, some of them get approved right away. Some of them have gone through a couple of denials, and we just keep cheering them on to stick with it, because you get really excited about it, but then it's like, oh, and then you get really
Right.
excited about it, it's like, oh. But the nurse advocates are really helping, and then at that point, if for some reason their insurance is just absolutely refusing. Ascendus does have another program, the PAP, the Patient Assistance Program, that they're trying to help a little bit with that. And of course, it's individually based, so they'd have to work with their doctor and their nurse advocate to be able to figure out what would be next for them. But we're
Mm-hmm.
hoping that every single patient has the opportunity to experience, this or one of the drugs that's coming up in the pipeline.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And speaking about that, and again, we will put the link to the Hypoparathyroidism Association in the bio of the show, and you list several partners, and we won't go through all these products, but everything from small biotech companies to large pharma is clearly focusing on this, so that's great, and the fact that you're partnered up with them and spreading the message, that's awesome. So now that and I'm going to pronounce it again wrong, but I'll say the brand name. So now that Yorvipath is on the market, awesome, but you don't close the organization down now. You still got a lot of other things to do. What excites you in terms of looking at some of these portfolios, whether they're in phase 2 or earlier development? Because I can just and I haven't researched the area probably as much as you have, but clearly you think about everything that's happening with regenerative medicine and some of these other genetic tools that we have in front of us. What else is exciting? I mean, in terms of do you envision a day where we can produce parathyroid glands in the lab and transplant them, or stem cell stuff, or what else is hot? Because clearly
Mm-hmm.
the organization's got a lot more to do.
Yeah, I think for now, like being able to get we have 4 more in the pipeline, being able to get them through, because they're
Mhm.
different mechanisms too. Like,
Got it.
so one can be a shot every day, one could be once a week, one can be a pill.
Hmm.
So there's all kinds of different opportunities for people, and not every drug's for every single person.
Sure.
And they may be on several of them throughout their lifetime, based on that. But it's been exciting because this past year, we did get in front of the FDA, and we were able to clearly help them understand hypoparathyroidism, not just from the clinical perspective,
Right.
but we had 13 patients that were able to share their stories, and all different types, genetic and idiopathic and post-surgical. So we were able to have that clearer understanding, so that as these treatments do come through the pipeline, that hopefully they will understand it better. It's not just these symptoms that are on a piece of paper.
Right.
When we talk about the symptoms like brain fog is not just losing your glasses, your wallet, or whatever. Put your glasses on your head and you'd forget where they are. At my absolute worst, I was driving down the road and literally had to pull over because I forgot where I was going, that I had been 100 times before.
I've
Had
done
to
that
call
before. So
my that's so scary.
yeah.
But I could not get my brain to think enough, because I was at my worst with that.
Yeah.
So it's helping them to understand that it's not just, oh, she got brain fog, she's a 50-year-old something woman, like she's going to have this brain fog. It's not that kind of brain fog. It is
Right.
serious. Like, you cannot function on a daily basis,
Right.
brain fog. So, and there's a lot of symptoms. That's just one example. There's a lot of symptoms like that people need to live,
Right.
like, and so we were excited about doing that. We're excited about being able to educate. In the beginning, you talked about like parathyroid. When you learn about it, it's a tiny bit when they teach it in the school. Sometimes they're not even teaching it anymore.
Yeah.
It's like, come on. But we're getting in front of clinicians. We're doing CMEs.
Nice.
We were able to do that this last year. We have some more coming up this year, where we're educating them not just on those symptoms, but how it is impacting things to look for, what to
Right.
listen for from the clinicians. And I had a really great conversation. We go to a lot of industry events, so we see all the clinicians and we can share as a patient and an association of what's going on with hypopara. And I remember this group of medical students in front of me, and I was like, wait a minute, you got, and at that point, Yorvipath had just gotten approved. And I was like, you guys are going to be able to treat hypopara patients with PTH. You're not going to have to go through this drama of the calcium and trying to get that under control, and the magnesium and the potassium and all that. You're going to be able to prescribe PTH for your patients. So you're going to have the happiest patients
Mhm.
with hypopara. So it's just exciting to think about the stuff that we can do now that we
Right.
have something. Our next big task, though, really honestly, we need a calcium monitor. So
Wow.
as a diabetic, you can measure every day. They have the things on the arms. They know when they need to do what they need to do with their medication. For us, if we're starting to feel low, unless we have standing lab orders that are stat, we're not going to know till tomorrow.
Right.
And we could save ourselves an ER visit. We could save ourselves from, feeling horrible if we had the calcium monitor to be able to do it. Because even with PTH, you're still going to need to monitor your calcium. It's just part of
Yeah.
it. But it's about treating the PTH, and the calcium comes along versus the treating the calcium, and you never really get better. You just got your lab value is better.
Got it. Got it. That's interesting. You think there'd be maybe some synergies there with everything we know now about just general atherosclerosis and the importance of calcium there in terms of plaques and all that. If there's some synergies there to what's being developed in terms of the diagnostic tools, but no, that's going to be of extreme importance. I didn't sort of make the connection when thinking about blood glucose. It seems like right. I mean, it goes hand in hand.
And that's a
Um,
really good point about the because in the 10 years that I've been hypopare, remember in the beginning I said I didn't have, when they did the heart cath, I didn't have the clogged arteries.
right.
10 years later, I'm participating in a study and I had all the scans and the ultrasounds. And
Right.
unfortunately, I'm considered moderate to severe now in 10
Mm,
years.
yeah.
Could a 50-year-old woman that happen to? Yes, but not in that period of time,
Right.
probably.
Right.
Probably all the intake added to it, in my opinion.
Yeah. But you mentioned something before. I was wondering if you could just touch on it for a few minutes because, aside from obviously all the work you're doing in the hypopara community, you have gone down to FDA and been involved in some of those meetings. And I think it's, maybe a lot of people are unaware that the FDA does have this very interesting patient representative program where it's not just, pharma and biotech companies that go in and say, hey, we're doing this, but talk about some of your experiences at the agency, if you could. Just, I mean, obviously that's so I've been to I come out of the pharma industry. I mean, my entire 35 years I was at the FDA 3 times. But talk about your experiences for a couple minutes if you would. I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it was really great because actually the farmer couldn't be involved in this. This was
Right.
just straight up us.
Right.
Michelle Ray's, she works with me at the Hypopara Association, and she was like, we're doing this. And I'm like, okay. So she took it and figured out how to make it happen. And most of the time, people will hire out a consulting company, but of course we're a nonprofit, and a small nonprofit at that.
Right.
So we were like, oh, we got to figure out how to do this ourselves. So it was really great because it took a year. It's a year process to be able to do it. But the patients actually get in front of the FDA, whether they're there, whether they see things later on, and they speak what it's about. I moderated the event, but we had 13 patients that talked. We had it's very structured. The FDA gives us coaches to be able to meet with every single month, and they did a fabulous job of coaching us through to be able to get to where we spent 5 hours with them. And we did have a representative from the FDA. We had that spoke for us on the endocrine part of it. And then we had several other people, but we had probably, I think we had about 75 people in the room. That's where the farm and all that, they got to come and listen and everything as well. But what comes from that is a scientific report that is then housed at the FDA and of
Hmm.
course on our website to be able to, help people to understand better
Yeah,
what's going on. We really needed to get Yorvipath and all these in the pipeline approved. And we're like, we've got to do something. We have to help. And this was our way of helping. And I think it really did make a difference. It absolutely made a difference in that. We did that in March and the drug was approved in August. And here we are. It's commercially available. So we're pretty excited about it.
absolutely. Absolutely. Hey, I know that hypoparathyroidism has awareness day now, which is, I believe, June 1st, every year. A global awareness and education events happen then. You mentioned the continuing medical education. What should we be on the lookout for as we get into 2025, as far as the organization, as far as you and conferences, talks, other initiatives that are going to be popping up on the radar in the next coming months, or for the rest of 2020, 2025? And anything else that I missed while we have you today?
Yeah, I really do appreciate this time and the awareness of hypoparathyroidism and our association. And yeah, we have Rare Disease Days coming up at NIH. We're going to participate in that. So we'll have a
Nice.
booth set up there for a couple of days. And then we are, one of our big things this year is we really have to understand our community better. We're creating a registry in conjunction with NORD to be able to really
Sure.
document all of our patients, as many as we can, so that we can better understand them. And then the other thing is to continue our finding clinicians. We need to help clinicians understand about hypoparathyroidism. So we plan to, again, attend all the industry events. This year, we're actually going to Denmark to the European Society so that we have a lot of patients there,
Nice.
um, so that we can, be a part, learn from they have a group that's over there as well, learn from them as well. So we're excited about that. We will, of course, have our patient conference. We host that every fall. And it, it really is about fellowship with the patients, but it's also about, like, we have a medical advisory board that comes in there for 2.5 days and educates us on some of the basics, educates us on the new things that are coming around. And we're able to do this because of donations that we get from our community. We're able to now host it as hybrid, so we can live stream it out. We've had up to 22 countries that have joined to
Excellent.
be able to help, because in other places they may not have as much education as we do. So we'll be doing that, and really just supporting all of the pipeline that we have going on, help with recruitment for different things that are going on. So it's a labor of love, because we know we get to help people. We live it every single day, so we get to help people. So it's very, very exciting for sure.
Yeah, I mean, just listening to you talk about it and thinking about sort of everything that you've accomplished, before you had a therapy available, helping shepherd through at the agency, thinking about next step in diagnostics and the new drugs that are coming on. Yeah, it seems like it's a very exciting time, and ultimately, what when we talk about advocacy, you want to see you've put it all together, and it's a very elegant model, and fully what you do can be copied by because we do have thousands of other rare diseases out there. So it's very inspiring. And any final messages? I mean, anything else that we missed while I have you today? And then I was just one other thing popped into my mind. I'm sorry if this is a silly question. I think about the other side of this because it seems like I don't know if there's a hyperthyroidism organization, but it seems like a lot of the stuff that you're learning goes both ways, right? I mean, especially when you think about this diagnostic, calcium diagnosis and all that. Is there a mirror organization that you work with on that front, or is that a separate thing entirely?
So it is a separate thing pretty entirely. However,
Okay.
or for us in the US, the Parathyroid UK, they work with hyper as well.
Okay.
But we've been so focused on the hypo, and really trying to nail that good. But I
Sure.
will say that I participate in the community of hyper because when I see
Right.
people socially, like on the social media sites and stuff, and um, when I see people that have gotten to the point, unfortunately, where they're getting a diagnosis, then I'm able
Hmm.
to like bring them over to help them know that they have support
Right.
on our end, and have been in touch with the people that are admins for those groups over there.
Got it.
So, but it is interesting because we met with a surgeon. We also participated in the Parathyroid Summit. So they were updating the international guidelines. So Michelle and I were invited to participate and put the patient voice in these guidelines, which was
Mm.
fantastic. We had people from all over the world in this, and we started in February. It completed this summer, and it should be published in the next couple of months here. They should have the
Got it.
final published because with the PTH is coming around, they needed to update that.
Right.
So we've been working a little bit with that as well. But we met a surgeon, and she was very passionate about like we need to slow this down. We need to quit allowing people to become hypo from surgery. So
Right.
but that's a whole other and at first we're like yeah, but then that's a whole other thing. So one of the things that I try to keep us is very streamlined to um,
Surely.
keep focused on the people. And I really see the landscape in the next year, 3 year, 5 year, just being completely different in how people are treated on a daily basis with this. So maybe at some point we could veer off a little bit into helping other groups once we get these treatments under our belt and we get everybody in our group feeling much better.
Sure. Sure. No, really awesome work. I mean, again, it's extremely impressive, and as I said, I love to see how you put together this sort of very, very elegant system that spans, as you know, saying between from education to support to research to advocacy. So I've written you on. I hope you have a great 2025, a great the next couple of years as the organization continues to do what it does. Again, for everybody that's going to be listening to this episode of our show across the various podcast networks or who'll be watching on the YouTube channel. Again, you've been spending time with Patty Keating, Executive Director, HypoPARAthyroidism Association, again, doing amazing things to improve the lives of people impacted by this disease. Patty, I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your schedule to talk to us for a little while today about what you're up to. Obviously, thank you for everything you do for this rare disease community. And as we like to say on our show, thanks for helping to create a better tomorrow for them all. Be what you do. Really a great story. And I look forward to continuing to follow your success.
Thank you so much for having me.
Great having you.